Entrepreneurship. Somehow, we've come to believe it is reserved for a chosen few, for the well-educated, for the prodigies, and the rest of us can only stand by in admiration. We forget that it is not something anyone is born with. It is not more unique to us than a beating heart. We all have it in us, every one of us. Sometimes it's something you plan, but oftentimes it's just something you refuse to give up. It feeds your passion and actions. It silently weeds out the unmotivated from the ambitious. Sometimes it's about changing the world, and other times it's about changing your own world. It's never about seeking comfort. It's always about innovations and discoveries through the grind and the undying desire to win. So, discover what you're made of. Discover Gray.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Benson Wu. I am the founder and chief creative officer here at Discover Gray. And we're so excited that you're joining us today. You're in for a great treat. We have our most amazing panel in Ugly Talk so far. So you guys are definitely here to learn some hard lessons. Today's topic is feeling like a pro and the art of bouncing back. With that, I want to share one quick story that I have. The truth be told that if it wasn't for a mistake that I made, a huge mistake that I made 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't have built Discover Gray the way it is today. Long story short, 4 or 5 years ago, I was working on a different startup, an ad agency. Some of you already know. And the beginning was fantastic. We have new clients, great projects. I even signed a 5 years office lease in downtown. Who does that? And I thought I had everything figured out. And I thought the way to show that I was doing well and we were successful is by headcounts. So we started hiring people left and right. 18 months into the startup, we hired over 20 people. It's a very sizable team for 18-month startups. But I was stupidly optimistic. And on the 20th month, the economy took a small dive and we lost a couple clients, but we were so stressed out because our cash flow position was so low at the time. And one night I was at my office, right? So I'm looking at the computers, looking at the screen, and I'm looking at the payroll for next week, and I'm looking at the bank account. I couldn't make payroll. It's just a fact. I couldn't make payroll. As an entrepreneur, I found out what could I do, right? So I did everything I can. I went to the client, asked for advance on the work we haven't done, taking penny on the dollars. I sold my Mercedes. I moved out of my apartment into the office to save money. But still wasn't enough, right? So on the 24th month of the startup, we were dead. I had to let go half of the team in 1 month, and that was a very painful experience. But from that, I learned a lot. You bet I did, right? I would never sign a 5-year lease in any office building without knowing where I would be in 5 years, number one. But really, it's one thing I learned that it's being overconfident, this idea of like going with your guts is not always great for you. And being nimble, and we were not nimble with a big payroll that we're going after, was really important for a startup. And I think for me is, when you fail and when you fall, the pain is gonna fade, but the scar and the lessons are here to stay. The ones that can pick those up are the ones that can go really far. So I hope my story really set the tone here. That what we're doing today is we want us to be authentic. We want to get down to ugly talk, to share the misstep, the mistake, the misfires, and the lesson that we learned from our panel and also from you guys, the audience. right? Because entrepreneurship is not rainbows and sunshines. You probably know that already, right? And without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend, somebody I respect and admire, and the co-host as the moderator for the event, Dr. Benjamin Ritter. Ben is the founder of Live for Yourself Consulting. It's a leadership, career development coaching company. He's a national speaker. He is also a host and creator of a 5-star podcast called Live for Your Life Revolution. So if you haven't listened to it already, make sure you subscribe to that as well. Check it out. So Ben, can you take it away?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Anson, for that beautiful story. I was actually reflecting on all the scars that I have from my career as trying to be a professional soccer player, ending up failing in that. But all the scars and the injuries that I've built up over the years have become pretty fun stories, and they actually are what makes me unique. And I hope what we can get into today are some of those scars in a lot of our panelists. And I think those stories are what make you unique and have really brought you to where you are today. So let's get to learn a little bit about our panelists right now. Odile, could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know you are the founder of Fab Ventures and Fab Community, ex-Lancôme. I might have said that right. I watched some YouTube videos on pronunciation. The CEO and president of L'Oréal Group. Can you give us a little bit more backstory, please?
Yeah, so as you can see with my accent, I'm French. It's 5 years I've been living in the Bay Area, now in Los Angeles. I'm happy to be with you in California. I spent most of my career working as a C-suite level executive in cosmetic companies and brands, in fact. And then I moved to another category and vertical, the telco industry. And that was pretty funny because I was thinking that I was on the top of the world as a CEO of Lancôme, a 3 billion revenues business. And I was suddenly, new to the telco industry, and I had to learn again. So the same, and we will come back to that in the Silicon Valley. So I think when you change of the environment, you learn that you continue to learn and that you need to go out of your comfort zone, I would say.
Wow. I am really excited to dive in a little bit deeper to your background. So thank you so much for joining us.
My
Billy,
pleasure.
So Billy, I'm from Chicago. Your name is an icon. You are an Emmy award-winning host and actor. You own a variety of different hospitality venues and nightclubs. You also are in the ad business, ad agent. You have your own ad agency, and also you're in HR. You have your own HR firm. Not to mention, you also are involved in political advocacy. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background? I don't even know where you would start.
Thanks. Born in, I was just thinking about, it sounds so big sometimes, like the hospitality industry and restaurants. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my restaurants are all closed right now in Chicago. Like, this is really rough. Speaking of feelings of failure and obstacle and just discomfort, but I'm sure we'll get into all that. Born and raised in Chicago, worked my way up just to put myself through school by working in the restaurant business. Started as a coat check kid when I was in 6th grade and kind of worked my way up all the positions. Just really loving to service people with great teams, and continued on to put myself through college and then law school. Became a lawyer. In law school, I decided to open up nightclubs because I thought that would be a good idea and help me pay for law school. That was, I worked a lot. I worked pretty much all day and all night. And, but I sort of had to at the time. It was a great learning experience. And decided through, now that I'm realizing it, some very big failures that I can only do one really well. And I chose the hospitality industry. And I started doing that and got into TV, all of which, sort of led to an appointment by the president 6 years ago, and stayed with that for about 5 years at the White House, and kind of repurposed or re-engineered my life around a bunch of failures to really revolve around this sort of dream company I always wanted, which is COACT. It's a marketing agency, as you mentioned. And now I'm sitting here in Nashville, Tennessee. We opened a Sunda out here, and Sunda, it's allowed to be open here. And so I decided to kind of do my quarantine this way. And I do pop into Chicago. Oh, normally I'm there half the time, but during quarantine, I've been spending a lot of it here in Nashville. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I feel like we're in a support group, because a lot of times when you're failing a lot, you feel like you're only failing alone. And this is like a support group. I love it.
As you were talking, I was reflecting on my own journey. And it's funny, during a recession, I went into the hospitality industry, which then led to 10 years of being in it, not opening nightclubs, but bartending and bar backing and liquor promoting and all that stuff. But, you know, I always thought the hospitality industry was going to be one of the safest places to ever park. And it's interesting to see how, you know, that has evolved over time. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your stories. Thank you.
Thanks.
Glenn, Mr. Rise and Grind, author, speaker, pioneer of the 800% Club. I don't think I've ever said the word 800%, so I'm pretty pumped to be able to say that today. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, man. So, like I said, my name is Glenn. I'm a husband to 1, a father to 7. My wife is currently pregnant with number 8. So we're going on 8 babies here. And I've been in the automotive industry for 22, 23 years, something like that, now in auto. And then I've had my show, #Rise and Grind, which is a morning show that I do at 5:30 a.m. Monday through Friday. We've done 748 episodes as of this morning of that particular show. So, you know, background-wise, I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona. I grew up in a unique situation where my dad is black, my mom is white, and they got divorced when I was 11. And after they got divorced, my mom remarried a white guy, and my dad married a black woman. And then they moved into the same apartment complex, 2 apartments apart. So my dad and his new family were in apartment 30. My mom and our family, we were in apartment 28. And the culture differences between these 2 houses was just insane. It was crazy. So every stereotype that you could think of existed. You know, Dad's house was all like, you know, sports and collard greens and
that sounds like an amazing show.
Gospel music and Motown. And I agree, right? And Dad's house was wild. Mom's house was a little more like country music, rock and roll, hanging out in bowling alleys, that type of thing. And so I grew up in this environment that now I look back on, and I'm so thankful for it, because it's given me the ability to connect with people from different backgrounds and belief systems and cultures. But during that season of my life, it was very difficult because I didn't really know where I fit in. Like, my skin was too dark to be considered white. It was too light to be considered black. And so as I went through my teen years and into all the way up into my 20s and into the auto industry, I got into a lot of trouble, man. I got into a lot of trouble hanging around with the wrong crowds, trying to fit in, doing all of those things. And so I got into automotive when I was 20, and I was really good at connecting with people, but I didn't have any really good relationships of my own. My life outside of work was just shambles, you know, drinking, partying, in and out of jail, all of those things. So fast forward a little bit, and I actually I had a daughter, and I lost custody of her when she was 6 years old. And that set me on a path where I was like, forget this. I'm not doing the automotive thing. I'm leaving. I had a very victim mentality. And so I hit the road, and I spent about 2 years just kind of traveling around, man, just floating, trying to figure out like who I was, where I fit in. And that floating led to me burning so many bridges that I ended up homeless for a period of time in San Diego, California. And homelessness led to hopelessness. Hopelessness led to a deep depression, which led to some suicidal thoughts. and ultimately an attempt. I tried to take my own life when I was about 28 years old. And so in that moment, after failing, clearly I failed. It'd be a little weird if I had successfully taken my own life and I was here doing an interview with you today, right? So after that really downtrodden point of my life, I was able to kind of make a shift and started to realize that I was the constant in every situation and that I take myself wherever I go. And so I started really diving into learning more about who I am and what makes me valuable. How can I add value to different situations and different environments? So that journey led me to Kentucky. I got back in the automotive industry. I jumped into a dealership, and in that dealership, I was able to help the dealership grow 800% in 6 years. It was a small dealership in a tiny town, population 9,600, a massive success, made a name for myself in the auto industry, met my wife, had lots of babies, so on and so forth, the white picket fence, all of those things. And then 2 years ago, I walked in. My wife was actually 9 months pregnant then too, which tends to be the case for her. But 2 years ago, I just felt that this tug to go out and do more for the industry. And so I quit my nice, comfortable, cozy job, and everybody thought I was crazy, and started my entrepreneurial journey. So here I am 2 years later, and I'm working with the leaders, owners, and general managers of dealerships all over the country. I've got 56 different dealerships that I work with now, and doing my show, and I've had some opportunities to speak on some stages and travel the world and just kind of do some amazing things. And so, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. This is my current youngest. This is Miss Oakland right here. I'm not really sure where she came from because I thought you and your mama went somewhere, but apparently not. So that's me. I hope I didn't take too long, but super excited to share this space and time with you guys today, and hope I can add value to the conversation along the way.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn.
Yeah,
I'm really excited for you to be here, and I'm happy that I've also had the chance to have another conversation with you for the podcast. And I'm happy that you brought another panelist. So more than merrier.
Yeah, one extra one, right?
Okay, Debra, you are a creator, a producer, and a host of an award-winning podcast, The Great Fails. You talk to a ton of very important entrepreneurs and execs about failure. So I'm excited to hear your own thoughts and your own personal stories on failure. But welcome to the show. Welcome to the panel. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about you?
Sure. Well, right before this panel, I was thinking, how did I get pulled into talking about my most vulnerable moments? And I can't see everybody else's faces. But Billy had the right idea. He had alcohol. So maybe I should have came armed. First off, thank you so much, Ben, for having me on this panel, and also Anson. And it's just so wonderful to be in good company with such, accomplished and amazing individuals. I started my career on Wall Street, on the trading floors of JP Morgan and Lehman Brothers. And so for the last 17 years of my career, I've been advising publicly traded companies on their capital market strategy. And so I consider this my second act: writing, producing, hosting the Great Fail podcast. And the Great Fail is basically on the rise and fall of really prolific, iconic companies. So think Tower Records and Atari, and the launch of Google Glass, and what led to them pretty much flopping. And so I'm a true crime junkie. There's nothing I enjoy more than a really good story. And during my stretch on Wall Street, I've had the opportunity to come really close and personal to see and witness some of the most spectacular failures. And so this was an opportunity for me to package something that I really love and package my experience and deliver some compelling content that I'm hoping is going to be very educational. And in a short period of time, we just won Adweek's Podcast of the Year awards. And, you know, I've had the opportunity to interview, meet, get really into the nitty gritty with some of the executives that have gone through failure. So I'm really excited to share with you guys what I learned today on my journey, as well as the things that I've learned from the podcast.
I would love to quickly know, which is your favorite episode?
You know, I love scandals. So it would probably be Briex. Briex is one of those, I've gotten a lot of great feedback on it, and it's kind of a cliffhanger. But really quickly, I don't want to spoil it for some of the listeners, but you know, back in, I think it was the 70s, the 80s, there was a gold mine in Borneo, and investors, sophisticated, intelligent, very well-traveled, and very, you know, people that have done their research, and geologists, they all flocked to the stock. And, you know, it turns out that not like the gold that they were finding from this mine was somebody who was shaving off his wedding ring. And people bought into it, and it shot to like $1 billion in valuation. So I love stories like that. And I think the one that we just launched today on Quibi, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Quibi, but I'm happy to talk about that later on. But Quibi is also one that I actually received a lot of requests to cover.
Thanks for sharing that. When I saw ads for Quibi, I was really confused about how they were going to make it. But then I always tell myself, like, there are a lot of people that buy a lot of things that aren't me, you know, so it's like you can't judge businesses based on your own perceptions. But I'm very, very curious to hear that story more later on.
Yeah, you definitely nailed it.
So let's really dive in to your failures. I appreciate some sharing already, but Billy, can you start us off and share what you might define as your greatest professional failure and what you learned from it?
Oh, well, there are so many. I think my path has been one where I have taken a lot of shots at different businesses, different partnerships, and I think the one failure that I've been really sort of strategizing and working and clawing my way out of and into this new world. You know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I just realized that one of the things that I'd been doing around that time was I was sort of opening up a lot of different restaurant concepts that were very much, I just got pulled into this world of sort of a competitiveness and almost trying to do what a lot of other people were doing in the world at that time. And, you know, I ended up with a lot of thrown together businesses with a lot of different partnerships that weren't fully thought out and were, you know, undercapitalized or under conceptualized. And I really kind of woke up 4 or 5 years ago with this life where I had all these different businesses, many of which I didn't love. And I didn't, and some, you know, and weren't making money. So I had like advisors and mentors around me, and maybe they were, you know, media darlings and winning awards, and I high five people or whatever, but I was really unhappy. and these mentors and sort of advisors that thankfully I had built relationships over time who really knew me and sort of had seen many things in life over time, really helped me sort of define where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And then really helped map out how to get from this particularly really sort of stressful, disturbing situation full of failures, and sort of help me re-engineer the businesses, the company, and then also just my life, you know, just sort of prioritizing around what was right for me. And that takes a lot to figure out who, you know, and I'm not saying I know exactly all the right answers now, but it really sort of helped me go from this grind, crazy mentality that I think I referenced in my sort of bio intro, to sort of say, stop, you know, I was just doing a lot of things that were about other people and other forces in the world. And I wasn't like really thinking about what was important for my one life that is, you know, finite and important. And you know, and so I began to take things a little bit more serious and structure things out of that, and build something around what was right for me.
Yeah, I can relate. I've been caught with my head down. And when I mean my head down, like 5 years later, looking up and being like, why have I been investing so much time into something that I actually don't like? And how do I figure out what I like? And how do I drop my ego and my attachment to the thing that I've been building to be able to actually have the life and the work that I want? I'd be curious, any other panelists like to add in, jump in, comment on what Billy said, or speak about your own failure?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I can relate 100%. So when I first shifted into the entrepreneurial world, you know, I had this big grandiose vision of what life was going to look like once I stepped outside of the walls of the 70-hour work week at the dealership, right? And immediately what I found myself doing was saying yes to anything that had a financial attachment to it, right? They're like, hey, Glenn, will you fly over here and do this? We'll pay you. Yes, 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 yes. And immediately, you know, 11 months later, here I was, I'm looking back over the last 11 months going, dude, I am on the road every week, Tuesday through Thursday. Like, I'm spending less time with my family now, which the whole point was to spend more time with the family. And so luckily, just kind of like Billy mentioned as well, I had some great mentors in my life, and I really sat down and said, okay, what do I want my life to look like? And let's build a business around that versus trying to build my life around my business. And so for the last 12 months, now we've been able to shift to where everything's virtual. I really don't travel at all. I get to eat breakfast and dinner with my kids 250 days a year. But really, once for me personally, once I just decided that it was going to be life first, then it's amazing how you can find ways to compress time and create and innovate around that and still be able to, you know, I still grind, I still put in the work, we're still growing those things. You know, I still have all the entrepreneurial struggles along the way. I fall down, I get back up, I fall down, I get back up. Still have that, but it's with joy now versus that first year where it was just miserable chasing the dollar.
Leave the opportunity open for Odile or Debra to chime in before I comment on that.
No, jumping in the conversation is that most of the time when we have a change in our life, we still think with the past experience. So when I came in the Silicon Valley, I was lucky enough to meet people like you during 30 minutes. And most of the time I was telling my story of the past. And when they were saying, how can I help you? They were trying to help me for the future. And I was losing a lot of time in the 30 minutes of conversation talking about what I did or failed or wanted in the past instead of projecting where they could help me with new introductions and new leads. So, and the second mistake I did, coming back to what you described, is I was thinking, I'm new, I can't help them. So instead of at half of the conversation thinking, hey, how can I help you? Maybe I don't know a lot of people in the Silicon Valley, but there are some of my connections or skills that could help you. I was embarrassed, and in a way, it was a failure at the end because I was super frustrated, thinking the conversation was not exceptional in the insights. And I'm pretty sure they were thinking, this is a weird, strange French lady. We don't know what to do about her because she's smart, but she doesn't know what she wants to. So coming back to what you say, I think we need always to project and to be super open-minded on what's coming in life and with new meetings, new people, feeling the energy. And it's like surfing, you know, and adapting without a way of thinking with a frame. And we love to have frames, for sure. So listening to both of you, it's very much like that, you know, thinking, okay, what I know is that, and sticking to that, and maybe it's not the best idea. That was my failure, for instance, arriving in San Francisco.
Yeah, I would echo that too, in that a lot of times I have found that failure comes from not really being able to step outside of your current situation and not really being able to reflect. And I would have to say that, you know, nobody ever, you know, one of the lessons that I've had from my personal and professional failure is that I wasn't prepared for it, right? Because who really prepares for failure, which is really why we're having this conversation today. But, you know, my, you know, sharing a story of something that happened with me, you know, I launched a global consulting firm around 2008 during the financial crisis. And I had thought to myself, you know, I'm such a badass, right? Like, while the whole world was falling apart, here I am, I'm building this business, this global business. And my agency was taking these thriving Chinese companies, right, that were making numbers that almost seemed too good to be true, and taking them to the United States and finding them investors and putting them on the capital markets. And, you know, what I would have never foreseen was that only a few short years later, there would be all these accounting scandals coming from China. And I was known as like the China girl because I was bringing these amazing rock star companies, my pipeline of business, my contacts, my investors, they were all from China. And so overnight, the industry collapsed. My whole business was decimated. And I think it was a result of just not really stepping outside of myself and seeing, okay, you know, you guys as entrepreneurs that are watching this and listening to this, if all your revenues were coming in from one place, you would think I need to diversify. And in my case, it was coming in from one territory. And I never thought, while I am in my career trajectory, that I needed to have a backup plan and really, you know, see the bigger picture. And as a result, I had my legs cut out from underneath me.
What's coming up for me as all of you are talking are two concerns. One, entrepreneurs might be listening and say, well, then how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? Because if everyone's saying, well, you get to a point, you realize you're doing something wrong and you're unhappy, well, then maybe I should never even start. Maybe I need to figure out what to start. And then also what's coming up is, well, what are the warning signs that maybe you are doing the wrong thing? Because it sounds like part of being an entrepreneur and part of dealing with failure is recognizing it, or Debra, as you said, preparing for it, and then being able to just pivot quicker, or to be able to deal with the emotional, you know, baggage that might come from it, or the fallout. So feel free to jump in. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Well, I you know, I think that's absolutely the case. And so in having the experience of speaking and witnessing so many of these failures, I think you really hit the nail. And it is that as I'm studying all this, every single failure that I have seen, there have always been warning signs, right? And that's kind of that was like a really profound thing that I've gone through during this journey of looking back in hindsight of my own personal failures, and then seeing the toppling of these amazing, iconic, established companies. There were always warning signs. And I think a big reason why we're having this dialogue is that, you know, you don't avoid failure, but you want to fail with a lesson. And I think one of the greatest lessons we can take away is being able to identify some of these failures ahead of time.
I think also you were sort of pointing to this, you know, the idea of like, oh my God, you know, young entrepreneurs could be sort of freaked out by all this potential failure, you know, and what should they pick, you know, and which road should they take, or what should their business be? I was just telling someone earlier today that, you know, I'm not saying this is the right thing for anyone and it's not foolproof, but one of the things that, because this particular person had two roads that they were sort of looking at, and I really feel like, you know, there are inevitably going to be, absolute obstacles that are just going to try to knock you down. I think, Glenn, you were saying, get knocked down and back up again, knocked down, back up again. I mean, really, I was thinking about that. I was like, man, that's really, really what it's like. You know what I mean? And so much so that you don't even realize it anymore. It's just part of the fight and the thrust forward. And I just think that, like, in picking, the advice that I was giving earlier was just that there has to be a tremendous, passion and sort of overriding energy, love, excitement. So much so that you don't really need to turn it on. It's like always on, because once you do get knocked down, you're going to need something to help sort of like pull you and push you through it. And so when you bring up the idea of, like, how do you pick, and maybe that goes to what I was talking about earlier, is some of these things that I was picking were for the approval of others out there. And when it came to those sort of knocks, I wasn't really enjoying the getting back up process. Whereas other ones that I full blown love, that were inherent and just sort of all about my DNA, were never about a struggle in getting up. It was just automatic.
I believe when I listen to all of us, when we have the little red flag warnings, like you mentioned, Debra, of a future failure as a company, as a culture, or as an individual, we don't want to listen to someone. I remember when I arrived in the Silicon Valley, I wanted to have a full-time job, and someone said to me, "Oh no, you won't have a full-time job." And I was saying, "What? I'm the ex-CEO of Lancôme, and I'm a top flyer." And I didn't want to listen to her. And the advice I give to my founders is most of the time to have advisors or mentors, and then independent board members that they can trust, because when they will have the happiness to have venture capitalists, they're pretty obsessed by the financial metrics. And the circle of trust where you can share your challenges, your vulnerabilities, exactly like we do today, it's not a lot of people. And you need still to be challenged, because if you're alone and very assertive with the people that are your investors, that's not good. So if I remember that conversation with this lady, I came back at home saying to my husband, "Oh, I'm super upset because she said that to me." And she was explaining to me that I will have a new path and I will find my way. And she was right. So we need to have people where from time to time they say to us tough things or things that we don't want to hear, but at the same time, it helps us to grow as leaders.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I resonate with that for sure. Thank you for sharing that. One thing that I have had the pleasure of being able to do in my life with all of these kids that I have, because there's babies everywhere, is I learned so much from my children, right? And so I've watched over and over and over again as children go through a certain process, and that process has taught me something about myself and about us all as humans. So this baby, right, this newborn baby, it's just like this blob of like goo goo gaga. It's like an alien thing, right? It just poops and pees and that's it, right? You feed it, you just set it down, it just lays there, it doesn't do nothing. It's totally okay, right? And at some point, something changes. You could see it, right? All of a sudden, the baby, like something changes in its mind, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, I'm not cool just laying here. Like I want to like move, right? And immediately after that change, you see it go through this process. Like its arms start to push out, its legs start to kick. You see the baby starting to like do this, right? And it's a struggle. You literally watch this baby struggle until ultimately it rolls over, right? So it changes the mindset. It goes through a struggle. That struggle actually creates the strength and the coordination that is required to have success on the rollover. And then they're cool with that for a little bit, and then something changes, and they're like, wait a minute, I want to be able to like move. So then the same process, right? Change, struggle, muscles grow, coordination. Next thing you know, they're crawling. Then change, struggle, grow, right? And next thing you know, they're walking, and then they're running. And I think we do this. I don't think, I know that as humans, we go through this process always. Change is always followed by struggle, always. But the growth is in the struggle. That's the only place. If you're not struggling, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And success is on the other side of growth. And so what I would challenge that young entrepreneur is I would say, don't fear the failure, embrace it. Understand that we're going to fail along the way. That's where the growth comes from. There's no true levels of success that I've found. I have yet, and I study a lot of successful people, I've yet to find anybody that was like, bro, this was the easiest thing I ever did in my life. It was so easy. I just stepped right into success and greatness. It's a piece of cake. You should try it. No, man, there's always a process. So when I find myself really comfortable, I'm not struggling, I'm not failing, then that tells me I'm really not pushing to be the greatest version of myself that I can possibly be.
That's really beautiful, Glenn.
Well,
as all you were talking, I just kept thinking about like that first time I failed and I got up and I dusted myself off. And it was like that turning point where I realized that failure was just a part of life, and it like normalized it for me. And I try to reflect on my previous experiences on when I failed and why it wasn't traumatic and why I didn't give up. And I think it was because I perceived that initial experience as progress instead of trauma, instead of something that is as a reason for me to stop actually moving forwards. And I think that is so critical, and all of you are hinting at that. And I think something else that has normalized failure for me is my social circle and my professional circles. And Odile, you mentioned having advisors. I'm curious, who do you keep around you to help you get through failure, help you normalize failure, and to keep you motivated and keep you engaged with what you're doing, or to see potential opportunities in what you're doing? And who would like to go first? Odile, would you like to chime in since you mentioned advisors the first time?
In fact, that's funny because as a corporation C-suite level executive, I had a lot of mentors older than me. And now I've got the feeling that it's younger people than me that nurture me and help me to continue to grow as a leader. And they say the same on the reverse. So that's win-win. Most of the people I trust, where I will call them saying, what do you think about that, etc., especially as a VC in venture capitalist in consumer brands, young ladies in a financial investment and coming from Roujol or Goldman Sachs and now in VCs and trying to have an impact and help founders and female founders and minority founders tackling underserved needs to be successful. And most of the time, they've got an approach that is very much about data and influence and growth, and I'm more about the brand and the business strategy and the product development. And when we exchange our notes, we nurture each other. So I would trust them a lot if they would say something about me, saying, hey, be careful with this founder or things like that. So I'm lucky enough to have very, very different profiles around me. And I think it's people that don't look like you and are different compared to your way of thinking, because it helps you, again, like Billy and Glenn and Debra were sharing, Benjamin, that it's stretching you and helping you to think differently.
I love the comment about there are people that don't look like you. Yeah, you need people that are have completely different lens and a completely different perspective, a completely different set of life experiences. I guess it's not necessary, but I do think diversity is super necessary. So that you can hear the little voices sort of play themselves out. Life and careers are a journey, and you need to be relationship building like crazy always, and keep an eye open or an ear open for those that could be great advisor mentors, even if they wouldn't realize that that's something they would be. Sometimes it's just somebody who can hear you out and know about you and know what's important to you, what you're capable of, believe in you, and then sort of be able to, kind of open up, give you the truth and sort of work with you and work. Those opportunities and exciting parts also are matched by failures and sort of scary parts, and they can help you sort of play out the probabilities and what those steps would be, and those red flags while they're happening, before they happen, after they happen. man, I don't even know how I would do it without people in my life to talk to, you know. In fact, you know, anything that I've ever been successful at has everything to do with everyone else. Like I'm completely utilizing all the resources and kind of plugging into all the energy pieces and all these different people that are, you know, like good-natured, smart people that care, and really sort of like trying to assimilate all that information, all that feeling, and then sort of make those decisions that begin to, you know, create your path.
I love the conversation that we're having right now, just about, you know, building your own. It's almost like you're building your own board of directors, because for companies to be successful, they have board of directors to kind of manage the management team. And so I have found that, you know, as entrepreneurs, you need your own personal board of directors, people that you can trust, that are there to kind of be your cheerleader. And it's really interesting because during my journey, it's always the ones that you never expect to help you that just come through, right? And the ones that you expect to help, all of a sudden they're like pulling back and they want to see what you do first, you know, prove yourself to me, even though they were in your tight-knit circle. And so, so it's been a really interesting, to say the least, journey. And I think that, you know, I agree with what Billy, Odile, were saying in terms of perspectives, because sometimes I think the key point, or I guess the key element that I keep as the people within my inner circle, they have to be positive, right? There's so many people that are going to knock you down. And so I always make sure that I have people with different perspectives who are always positive. And if I have a bad idea, they let me know, but in a more gentle way. And that they serve as my checks and balances. And I make sure to get people who are like, you know, there's an economist that I talk to all the time. Most of what he says, like, I can't even understand, but I talk to him regularly, because even if 10% sink in, I just learn something, you know? And so I try to get people with very interesting perspectives that are thought leaders within my inner circle.
Yeah, I love that Debra used the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was enthusiastic also about the energy that you know, between the toxic people, smart people but toxic, and the smart ones, but you know, giving you an uplifting experience. And I remember when I arrived in the Silicon Valley, I was very much about, again, the rationale, thinking, hey, I come from the tech industry. Let's be in B2B, advice, bank, and fintech. And when beauty and fashion companies were calling me, I was thinking it was like the old past, the traditional industries, and I was getting bored by that. And at the end, I was thinking, wow, it's super exciting. They're about beauty, sexual wellness, whatever was fixing a problem that was still existing and that global brands were not fixing. And at the end, you would have said 5 years ago that I would be with a venture capitalist firm trying to support seed stage companies doing less than 2 million revenues. I would have said to you, no, really? Come on. And I'm super excited by that. So it comes back to the energy that you mentioned, Debra.
Yeah, I agree with that 1000%. I like how Debra used the metaphor of a board of advisors. I think it's important when you're searching out your mentors, it's not one size fits all, right? Like, I have mentors that I go to as far as the spiritual side, right? That help me tap into the spiritual side of what I've got going on. I've got other mentors that I talk to about business. I've got some sharks in my circles, right? And they're the ones that I go to when we're talking profits or those types of things. I also have people in my life that are family, you know, to help keep me in line when being a good father and a good husband and those types of things. So I think it's important, you know, just like a board of advisors, you've got somebody that understands money, somebody that understands marketing, somebody that understands all those different components. You got to surround yourself with those. And then to follow up that point with that, Odile was tapping into there too, you know, people that wow you, like, I like I want to be around people that wow me. Like I'm like, wow, what they're doing is amazing. The way they do it is amazing. And those are the people I like to try to surround myself with. And one last thing I just want to add for the entrepreneurs or the people, younger people that are maybe coming up. It took me a little while to realize this, but as we go through seasons, as you grow in your career, as you grow in your business, as you grow as a human, it is okay for mentors to come and go as well, right? Like it's okay. Like I have people that were an integral part of my growth in my life, and we send Christmas cards, and I might, we might talk to each other once every 6 months or so, but I reached a point where the value that they added towards my growth wasn't there anymore, right? It was more like we're just hanging out, and just hanging out is not going to get me where I need to go. So sometimes we have to let go of previous mentors so that we can grow to those next levels in our business.
It's really powerful advice from everyone. As you're all talking, I can't help but think that some entrepreneurs think that they need to protect their ideas or they can't share certain things. But you all are sharing that you need to be open and you need to be honest and you need to actually be seeking with whatever it is that you're trying to create or what you are creating. I don't know, would you agree? Would you disagree? Did you need to learn how to be open about what you were working on, to let go of that fear? Has it been important to your success? Would you disagree with me? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I would strongly encourage founders to meet even their competitors, because I see a big difference between the US culture, especially the West Coast, and the European culture, and maybe New York. If you're a startup in seed stage in New York, you don't want to share your deck, you keep your figures for you, and even your advisors, you're telling the story, but you don't share. I think here in the West Coast, California, LA, San Francisco, people share a lot. And the more you share, the better it is, because your North Star, you're the only one to know. It's your purpose and your values. And then the way you execute it, nobody can copy, because it's depending exactly on what you do, in fact. So I would strongly encourage people to share what they do with even their competitor. I think there is someone that has no micro in the attendees. I don't know who.
I think to tag on that, that's one of the reasons why it's really important to have an ecosystem of really trustworthy sorts around you so that you can share. And I'd also say that it's extremely hard to not share and navigate this world with all the nuances and elements, known and unknown, that could knock you off or seriously impede your ability to grow or be profitable, which is incredibly hard for long periods of time. So, I mean, it's really hard to just not absorb all the elements, resources, inputs around you. So, so whether you call it sharing or not, and I know what you're talking about. I thought that was really an interesting point about the difference between those in certain parts that are more, close to the chest with their stuff and maybe not as trusting. And then those that kind of been through it and kind of know it's more of a sort of a communal, opportunity to get, inputs, to each their own. But in the end of the day, it's really hard to maximize your potential and hit the highest probability of being successful when you are not, taking advantage of all the potential support around you.
Yeah, I just saw somebody post something about protecting your ideas. So it seems like that's a really popular question. And I think that, it's interesting because when you're in the creative space, it seems as though collaboration and a lot of discussions around that really help create and cultivate that creativity. And, in the financial world, sorry, something just popped up. So in the financial world, it's more, everybody's a lot more guarded, right? And what I've encountered in just studying so many of these companies is that there's so many brilliant people out there. There's so many great ideas. And I think there is a fine line between sharing and giving away too much. And I think it's as an entrepreneur, you should really understand what it is that makes you unique and kind of have a clear distinction of what it is that you want to share, to be inspired, and how you want to execute. And so with all these brilliant ideas and brilliant people, it all comes down to execution. And I think that you need to be comfortable to be able to articulate your ideas and then take away from the conversations on how you want to execute.
Yeah, I think Debra hit the nail on the head, man. Execution is the key. So, from what I've found in talking to some of my friends, colleagues, things like that, typically when they don't want to necessarily share an idea, typically what I've seen is there's fear there, right? It's fear-based. It's either fear-based, like I'm not really sure if this is a very good idea, so I'm kind of embarrassed to share it, or it could even be lack-based, like, hey, if somebody else were to do this, they could maybe do it better than me, or and the reality is there's no shortage of people that we can serve, or opportunities out there. The world is an abundant place, but it really comes down to execution. Who's going to take the ball and run with it? And if you have your idea and you're running full speed ahead, then I think some of those fears kind of get put to the side because you're just so busy breaking through walls. You're not as concerned that somebody's gonna take the ball away from you and run back in the other direction. Execute, man. Just get after it, go after it. Share with people that you trust, and execute every single day on that.
We've been talking a lot about. Oh, Debra, did you have something to add?
No, I was just going to say, Facebook was not a unique idea. There were so many other social media companies before that, and they managed to become the behemoth. So I was just piggybacking off of what Glenn said.
And we've been talking a lot about managing or preventing fear. We talked about creating a social circle around yourself, normalizing it, grinding it out, being, doing your due diligence, etc. But what do you do when failure happens? And right now we're in the midst of a global pandemic. We've all experienced failure in some way, shape, or form, I assume. What is the first thing you do? Can you walk me through that process for yourself? And Billy, would you like to start?
Well, so a lot of practice, like being calm in the chaos. I think a lot of the feelings of failure, whether it's pre or present, it's a bit of a freak out, it's still game on. And I think you have to sort of remember that you have to be calm in the chaos and apply everything that and engage any resources that you have, or tap into any advisors that you might have entrusted, and really begin to not give up. And I mean, I think we were talking about this earlier, like the whole knocking down and getting back up. It's like, it's just one of those again. And as you do it, and you're going down, you've already learned so many times before. And by the way, this is part of the reason why we're trying to make sure everyone understands that failure is not always a bad thing, and to get out there and take a lot of chances and take a lot of risks, and not fear that, because you actually learn from them, so that when real failure happens, you're not just over. You're in the chaos, and you're beginning to sort of analyze all the pieces, prioritize a lot of the fires, and begin to think about all of the ways in which to, whether you call it organize, delegate, chip away, work every angle, and these are things that I can't just like list and say that they work for everyone, but it's like as you have failures happen, and again, this could be with relationships, which is really just what call it partnerships are, or it could just be with things that you build and create or cook or paint or whatever. And if it falls apart or it falls short of expectations, all the ways in which you deal with those failures become yours, and they're evolved tools that you can, remember to sort of, stay calm and try to very quickly apply all of that. And I think the more you begin to, thrust yourselves into these situations and take risks and engage in conversations or activities or things that may be uncomfortable, you begin to sort of build this capability of attacking, failure as it happens, if that's what you want to call it.
I really like that you touched on partnership, Billy, because, as we're talking about how to deal with failure, going back to what happened back in 2010, 2011 with China stocks imploding, I was a newbie at failing, and it never happened to me before. I was thrown off filter, and I took it so personal, right? Even though there were other companies that were failing, I, as an entrepreneur, this was the first company I had launched, essentially, and it was very hard for me. I really internalized it, and my knee-jerk reaction was to just jump into a partnership with somebody who's going through the same thing. And on paper, it made a lot of sense. We were both very seasoned. And we both had a strong book of business, and it seemed like there were synergies there, but it's sometimes even more, you sometimes have even more to lose, right, than a marriage. I think in this partnership, it was money riding on it. It was like, it was very fragile for us. And so beneath the surface, what were our weaknesses were that we didn't really truly understand each other. We didn't know how to complement each other. We didn't know what were the pain points that we were solving through this merger and how we were going to tackle this. And so I look at it like it was a rebound, right? I just got out of something, jumped into something else. And I think that's oftentimes I see that's kind of an entrepreneur, mistake when you're new to this. And I think that I dealt with my failure by magnifying it because I didn't pull back. I didn't reflect on what happened. And I didn't let this failure instruct me. I think it's really important now that failure should be instructing you and teaching you something. How are you going to do it different this time? And you're going to be smarter about it.
Yeah, I think you really have to. You kind of have to change the definition of failure. For me, I changed the definition, and I don't know if it was the gambler in me. Like I used to gamble like a lot, right? Like I used to spend a lot of time in the casinos. I thought I was going to be a professional poker player and all of those things. And for me, like it didn't matter the ups and downs of, I could spend 3 days in a casino, and sometimes I'm up and sometimes I'm down. And as long as I was still in the casino, it wasn't a failure, right? It wasn't until I quit and walked out and got in the car and like got back home, then I'd count the money and be like, dang, I failed. But while I was there and there was still a shot and I was still in the game, whether I was down to my last chip, it didn't feel like failure. And so for me, I've just been able to kind of shift that definition of what failure looks like. I think failure only comes when you give up, when you completely quit and give up, which I've been there, right? I know exactly what that feels like. But as long as you're still in the game, it's just part of the game.
Yeah, I will just add to everybody's insight and great insights that In fact, when you fail, you have the circle of trust. Glenn, you were speaking about your children. I remember when I had been in New York, I had a lot of management issues, and I had to understand the American culture compared to French people that are very much about French radical candor. And my coach said to me, oh, you should talk to your little son. He's 7 years old. You should ask him what he thinks about you. And Oscar, my son now, 22, said to me, oh, mommy, I like you now. You're more patient. You were yelling about me because I had a Spanish nanny. I need to speak English. And at the same time, you speak French at home. And what I like is when you lose, when you play games, and that you don't want to go into the waves. And I like the fact that you're scared of the waves and that you're vulnerable. It didn't say the word vulnerable. It was fragile or something like that. I was saying, what? You say that to me? And it was a great learning because, in fact, it was not defining me as the super mommy and the superpower, but more defining me with all my little holes or failures and things that were not okay, and saying, I like you just for that. So the circle of trust is for sure when you're successful, but also when you've got issues, and it can be your family, your partner in life, a partnership in business, the advisors that you mentioned, Glenn and Lily, or Debra, the partnership, and the great mentor that you have as an economist. It's pretty much the case.
Hearing how failure is okay when it's external, but then failure starts to become negative when it becomes internal. Like, I'm not good enough, or how could I have prevented this, or what are people going to think of me? And I don't want to discount that failure hurts. Failure is traumatic. And even if I look back in my life and remember some of the times where I failed, the pain is still there. But also the awareness of how this has led me to where I am is there as well. I would love to hear from our panelists, how long did it take to recover from one of your major failures? And I know this is just out of the blue.
I've never recovered. It's all pain.
Yeah. Still, and so no, expand on that.
I still wake up with nightmares all the time. Still, no. I mean, I think they stay with you, which is why you it's like when I love when you were saying, Glenn, I'm complimenting you a lot tonight, Glenn. I don't know why. I keep complimenting your stories, but like when you're talking about the kids and like when they get up and they start moving and it's like, they stub their toe, they run into something, they just know not to do that again, but they remember what that feels like. Like, I remember pain. You remember pain, and it's what helps you, you burn yourself on that pot. You are not touching that pot again. So I guess, I don't know I guess you recover from it, but you don't leave it. You know what I mean? Like, at least for me, like, especially now when I'm in partnerships with people that are sort of, at COACT, it's more of a community-based, like, advertising agency, right? Like, we aggregate all these different top creators, and they're so talented, but perhaps maybe some of their experiences as an entrepreneur is not as deep. And so I find myself in these sort of situations where I am now trying to create the structure around, not getting burned, like burning yourself on that pot or running into that doorway, or like, hurting yourself when, the goal is to be, have structure and grow and do the things that you ultimately want to do. So I'm still, I guess recovered, but I still know that pain, and I still bring it to every single opportunity to share, because then you don't have to have that, person burn themselves. You can just tell them how hot that really is, or what's a better way to do something, what's a better way to get around that. I think your question was, though, like, there are definitely times where you're just down. I mean, you're down for the count. I think Debra was like saying, like, you just get hit so hard, it's out, like lights out, start a new one. And by the way, I'm feeling that right now. Like, I'm freaking out. Like I feel horrible for the hospitality industry, being at 25% or 50% or even 75% in Nashville. That's called failing. That's called bleeding out. Now we're closed in Chicago, and I feel horrible for all the you know, so many people that I came up with that were you know, and it, you know, so I'm looking at that, and I'm in that storm right now, and I'm trying to do everything we can and play every angle and work as hard as we can. But, you know, it could be that failure where you go, oh, game over, and got to start. You know, I mean, I'm a workaholic, so there's other companies that I'm like, thankfully have wonderful partners with and working on, but like, that's a huge part of my life. Like, that's like, this bio started with that, and that game could be over. I mean, never thought that I could say that, but you know, so to be honest, yes, there will be I will go down. I will probably double the pain that Debra had, and I will just probably go into a deep, dark place for a really long time. And then, you know, actually we should have a follow-up next year. We'll see how that goes.
We'll be for you and your industry. And earlier, you know, Debra mentioned, like, I think it was Debra, maybe Odile mentioned the just some energies, right? You're always looking, and you see somebody's energy, and you never know. And I think, Billy, that's why, you know, I feel energy coming from you too. I'm like this guy Billy over here. I got to get to know this guy a little bit better. So many people are.
I was saying the same thing when you were clocking 3 days in a casino. I was like, man, what's that like?
Yes, many of those days. But no, man, it's like some people are like, you need to forget about it, you need to let it go, you know, so on and so forth. And I think that's wrong. I don't think that's the right advice, right? Like, you don't need to forget about it or let it go. We need to file it. We need to store it, learn from it, and grow from it, right? We need to learn from each of those things. So to answer your question, to answer the first question is how long. I'll tell you, for me personally, I had 2 seasons of my life. One season of my life where I lingered in failure forever, right? Lingered in failure, victim mentality. I spent a big season of my life doing that. Now what I've been able to do is create systems and structures to break out of that. So perfect examples right at the beginning of the COVID stuff, right? Like, COVID's hitting, and I'm watching the news every day, bro. Like, I'm on the news 5 o'clock watching the governor. What's the governor got to say? And I'm getting messages and emails from people in very high up places, right, that are saying, you know, this is coming, this is happening, and I'm going out and I'm doing the shopping and all of those things, right? I'm storing up, and I just remember getting home at the end of the day some days, just like, oh my gosh, I have like failed my family. We're not ready for this. We just, you know, we've only been in business for a year. I had this good gig that I left. And at the end of the day, I just wanted to crawl into like the fetal position in my closet and just suck my thumb, right? And so for me now, I have a reset button every morning. I hit a reset button. I go through the same process every day, first thing in the morning, to reset my mind, recharge, some gratitude, some goals. Like I create this space for me to hit reset so that I can reflect on any areas of improvement from the day before, and so that I don't get stuck in that failure for too long.
You could be a coach, Glenn. In addition to all your roles, you could be the coach of everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Odile. I appreciate that.
I love what Glenn said about structure. I think structure is so important. You know, and I think what Billy was saying is that you don't ever forget the feeling of failure, but you kind of wear it like a badge of courage, right? And it just makes you stronger. It makes you better. It makes you think differently. And I think the whole pathway back to bouncing back And I think bouncing back is a little misleading because you think once you hit the floor, you bounce right back up, right? And there's a process in that. And I think, first of all, failure, I think, is very grounding. It's humbling. But I think that the pathway to bouncing back is stepping back, reflecting, seeing how you could do it better. And it's a process. And it's a process where I kind of subscribe to what Glenn is saying. You have to have structure in place because it's a muscle. You know, wake up at a certain time, you go through this consistent manner of, you know, maybe it's the positive affirmation, maybe it is the meditation. For me, it's definitely the meditation. My whole family feels it when I don't do it. But I have found the importance of structure in terms of bouncing back or overcoming that crappy feeling of failing.
Failure can feel a lot different if you've put in the pre-work to build a little bit stronger a foundation, or the practices to help you perceive things less through a negative lens. But then sometimes it comes out of nowhere and knocks you down. And it's really easy to focus on what just knocked me down. But I think for me personally, I need to reflect back and say, okay, how have I been prior to this? When have I been that champion? Where are my successes? And where do I know that I'm going despite this blip in my life, which failure really is? It's a moment. It's a pin, you know, it's a raindrop, a pin drop. Before we move to questions, and please, everyone that's listening right now, please submit your questions and Q&A in the chat. Do our panelists have any final words of advice? Like, imagine an entrepreneur right now is dealing with failure. They are looking around themselves and they don't see opportunity, and they don't want to take a risk or they are experiencing failure and they don't want to take another risk. Do you have any words of advice for that entrepreneur? And we can start with Odile.
I will say that you learn for life. So in fact, if you're, I think there is a study showing that the people above 80 years old, there are only 3% of them continuing to learn. I hope I will be one of these 3%. Because if you continue to learn, your brain continue to develop, etc. And I think failure, it's pretty much like we say, you learn things and then you adapt and you continue to move forward and to grow as a leader, as an adult, as a beautiful person and human being. So I will say learn for life.
And I would just say, you know, if somebody's in the middle of failing right now, right? Entrepreneurial mindset, tried to go out, they're trying to do their own business, they're in the middle of failing, which it is a crazy season right now, right? So there's probably a lot of people that are in that boat. And so my words of advice would be, take a really, really hard look at why are you failing without pointing the finger at anyone else, right? We're so quick to blame, I'm failing because of this, or because of that person, or because this person made that decision, so on and so forth. And it wasn't until I realized that we are not victims, but ultimately the catalysts of our failures as well as our successes. Once I realized that, like, if I'm falling or failing, typically I can look in the mirror and go, well, Glenn, you're probably failing because you went golfing 3 days last week when you should have been working. Or maybe you're failing because you're staying up a little bit too late, or you're watching a little bit too much TV, or maybe you're failing because you're spending 8 hours a day flipping through social media, or maybe you're failing because Fortnite is more important than your empire, right? Like, there's typically, if you take a look inside and really look in the mirror, what we're getting in life is typically a result of what we're putting in. And so I would just suggest, take a good hard look. Why are you failing? Maybe it is the product. Maybe it's a system. Maybe it's a process, but these are all things that are within your control. Make the adjustments, make the shift, and get.
Yeah, I think I feel bad when I see entrepreneurs or even just leaders, quickly identify a quick blame and a quick point, and a quick, it's that or it's that over there, because what you're really doing, well, one, usually it's wrong, but also it really robs you of the process, and it's really in the process that you find everything that we've been talking about here, and so I totally think that's the whole thing about failure is really don't rob yourself of the process to really grow in that moment, even if you don't figure out the exact answer. You're growing through the analyzation of every single possible thing, which is why talking to other people sometimes helps, because your brain sometimes needs, you need to pull and expand out and look through a different through different lens. I'd also just say to anyone out there that's an entrepreneur or just a human that this is a really weird time. All right. And so everybody is feeling failure and some dark moments, and you just have to realize that, one, we've all been out in the world failing for a while now. Like if you're failing now, just so you know, you're not missing anything, because everyone is kind of failing. Like everyone is moving at a different pace. Everyone's having personal issues, whether they say it or not. Everything is disrupted, and you just have to remember that, so you don't blame that, or you don't blame yourself. You do go back and look and analyze all the pieces and really focus on what's going on in the environment and everything about your situation. And then don't get distracted by the negativity and the failure and all the noise and out there in the world and in social media and in your head, because it's a weird time. Like, we're all being tested. You're not missing anything. We're all going through it. The other thing to combine with that is just like, keep going forward, do something, one foot in front of the other, dress up, read something, do something, talk to someone, just keep moving forward, do something. Rest is part of that. You need your rest. You need to take care of yourself. And by the way, I didn't do that for a while. Like when it's time and people are depending on you as an entrepreneur and you have to be up, working 18 hours and you're thinking about it another 3 or 4 hours. It's like, you have to remember that you have to take care of yourself too, so that you can, on behalf of all, push forward, keep moving forward, keep doing something, and tap into others for that support.
Yeah, I think it's such a paradox that I've never spent this much time at home, but I've never gotten this little amount of sleep. I don't know what's going on. And so,
or good sleep.
Good sleep. Yeah. It's incredible. Maybe perhaps it's just everything that's going on, the amount of stress that we're undertaking and that we're seeing, and I echo what you just said, Billy. I think if you're struggling right now, you're not alone. The whole world is in disarray, and it's not the end of the world. And I think that some of the greatest success stories have come from this repeated failure, and I know that if you're running a business, and one of the worst feelings is when you have this vision and people buy into it and they believe in you, and you can't help but tell them, I'm going through a hard time, and there's nothing more vulnerable than that, especially too if they invest in you and put money into your venture. And I've been there before, and I think it's about having faith and coming back stronger and better. There have been people that have declared bankruptcy 6 times and then became the president of the United States, right? But some of the most successful businesses have undergone failure. They've pivoted, they've tweaked, they've declared bankruptcy, they've reemerged again. And I think, think about it for the long game. Eventually you're going to get it right. Hopefully.
as all of you were talking, I was envisioning this dark tunnel, fully no light at all, but there's this light inside you. And so no matter if there's a light outside of you, you can always feel hope or be motivated or be engaged in your own life if you keep that light alive within you. And then also, I envisioned like, okay, so there's this darkness all around you, but what if you start giving other people light? And so in the midst of failure, how do you keep yourself motivated? How do you perceive it as progress? And then how do you start actually helping other people feel that same way and surrounding yourself with more and more light? And in my own experience, that has kept me resilient through times that I might not have been. And I'd like to welcome Anson back to see if there are some questions or to close up.
Yeah, I actually have a questions. And I learned a tremendous lesson from listening to you guys too, but I want to brought it back to the blame conversation. What if when you failed and you know somebody really caused it, right? And we are human and we have that emotion. I know we don't want to blame other people for the result of your company, but how do you guys learn to forgive yourself and others, right? Anybody can share any idea or thoughts on that topic specifically?
I can't. I mean, you still have to analyze the why and the approach or the chemistry, or I find myself still analyzing why I even got into the situation or what could I have done along the way. There's going to be, for me, I don't care about slapping someone's, wrists or kicking myself or them. I'm moving forward and it's fast and furious and there's a lot, depending on what's ahead. And so what just happened? Like what just, laid the cars out in front of me so I can read this and say, all right, next time. And by the way, red flags is a big one. Like what were the red flags? What could I have done along the way? How could I have improved this situation? How could I have avoided it? How could I have winded it down quicker? How could I have, rebounded from the problem faster? How can I make sure I don't get in this situation again? When you fill your mind with those things about how to build value for the future and create better relationships and a better non-stressful world for yourself, you hopefully will not have all that empty, dark space where you begin to like kick yourself and hate someone and all these other things. You just keep thinking about like all the positive benefits you can make with an amazing analyzation of it all and come to some new learnings and think about how that'll improve not just your own life, but those around you.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Thanks, Billy. I think one thing I could add from my experience is at the time when you're failing, you might not see it. Because looking back right now, I can see, well, we should have been more nimble. I could have been more open-minded. When everybody is singing praises, all the team is like, this is great, nobody's against you, that is a red flag. And it's tough to see at the time. So now that I learned, even when you fail, when you feel like it's hurting, just trust the process. Because after this whole tough situation, you're gonna start learning stuff. You don't know it yet, but you will. It always does. As long as you stay positive, and you're gonna pick up things that you didn't look for, and it will be good for you. Connect the dots, right? But I want to say thank you very much for the moderator and the panel. As I talked about, this is an awesome panel that we put together. We're super excited. There is a brief survey after the webinar, so you guys let us know what you like about the webinar. Should we keep doing this? Any feedback? And again, the panelists here is to help. I know Billy will put in their contact already. So if all the panelists would willing to share maybe your Instagram or something in the chat, willing to help, feel free to do that. I know we have audience here. We'd love to connect and talk to somebody in your guys' position. We did a really quick poll in the middle of the webinar, and it looks like around 50% of the audience right now are either starting a company or getting ready to start a company. So that kind of implies they're early stage or sort of in the middle of scaling up still. So these feedback are definitely really, really helpful for everybody here. But thank you so much for joining Ugly Talk.
A pleasure.
I want to do a photo, but it's hard here, so I'm going to do a screenshot.
No, this has been great. Thank you guys for having me. And I saw over in the comments, Cheryl Wise, she had a quick question, advice to deal with the red flags that you may be seeing even when you're headed for failure. And Cheryl, I just want to throw this out there real quick. Just make sure here's what, as humans, we feel, and then sometimes we get stuck in the feel, and we need to move it to fact, right? So whatever you're feeling, don't just feel it, fact it. And then so look at your metrics, measure, and if there's actually if there's a problem there, then obviously you need to address it. But I just wanted to put out there right now. There's a lot of people all in their fields. A lot of people in their fields, right? And we just need to stay out of that feel space, make good decisions from the fact space. But yes, this has been great. A pleasure connecting with you guys, and I hope that I can connect with you further. Beyond just this year. I'd be excited to get to know you all a little bit better.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.